Alright, good afternoon, YouTube. Good morning, good evening, whatever time of day you're watching this. Hope it's good. Alright, haven't been on in a few days, a couple weeks really. It's been pretty busy with work and just different things. But a couple of things I want to talk about tonight. Right now I'm just depriming and sizing some 223 for my Savage 110 bolt action. Great shooting rifle. I've actually developed a couple pretty good loads for it, which kind of brings me to what I want to talk about. So first off, in some of my prior videos, there was some ongoing debates about plastic tools, metal tools. There was comments about data, things of that nature. So first off, I just want to say anything that I do, do at your own risk, okay? Just because I do it, don't mean you have to do it. Just because I say it, don't mean that it's something you should do. It's my methods and techniques. It's what works for me. However, some of the videos I did, the purpose of those videos was just to go over some basic stuff. I wasn't meaning to get into a debate about what tools to use or what data is best or what data is better or really any kind of technical aspects. It was really just to cover some basic stuff for someone who wants to start reloading. Now, as I said in one of my videos, you don't have to have the latest and greatest stuff to make good quality ammunition. You can actually use those little Lee loaders, the kind that has the mallet, the die, comes in a little box. You can use those and you can make just as good of ammunition as the guy who uses the Dillon press. Okay, so you don't have to have the latest and greatest technology. When it comes to all your prep tools, you don't have to have, all the high-end stuff. I mean, it's cool if you do, and of course it's great and handy and all that, but it's not a necessity. You can use basic stuff, okay? I mean, when you're swagging your primer pockets, you can actually use a Phillips bit if you have to. I used a pocket knife once, okay? I'm not saying that's the best way, but it does work. So you don't have to have all the complicated things. In addition to that, it's good to have manuals and read manuals. And yes, it's good to have a wealth of knowledge. I encourage anyone who wants to load to read and learn your manuals. However, you don't have to read 32 manuals and before you can reload. One thing about manuals that I have learned is while they all have about the same basic point, some of them I have seen sometimes will contradict one another. In addition to that, I've seen some of them where the data will vary. In addition to that, I've seen some of them where they will promote their own, their own brand. So you don't have to, I guess what I'm getting at is you don't have to overcomplicate a simple process. It's not a complicated thing. Yeah, you got to be safe, and yeah, you got to pay attention to what you're doing, okay? And yeah, there's certain rules you have to follow. But at the same time, you don't have to overcomplicate it to the point to where it's not fun, okay? When it comes to loading metallic cartridges, it's very simple. You got a primer, you got brass, you got powder, and you got a bullet. The main purpose for the case is to hold it all together, okay? Now, I know there's going to be some guys that's going to tear into me for saying some of the things I'm about to say, but that's fine. I've loaded for a little while now. I spend 20 to 30 hours a week at my bench. I have probably loaded, I don't even know, well up into the maybe a million, couple million rounds, and I've probably shot as many too. I've studied a lot. I've watched a lot of videos. I've read a lot of books. I've been around a lot of old school reloaders. But I've also done a lot of tests and experiments myself. I still have all my fingers. Still have both eyes. I haven't blown myself up. So, when it comes to what tools to use, okay? Yeah, there is the possibility, if you're using plastic tools, there is the possibility for static. Yes. However, your lead dippers, when they're made, they have an anti-static agent added to them already. If you get to where powder is clinging to them due to static, you can wash them in dish soap, let them dry, and you will no longer have static. Your powder funnels, if you have one that begins to have an issue with static, take an old dryer sheet. I know a lot of you guys use dryer sheets in your media. Take an old dryer sheet, wipe it out. You no longer have static. Now, as far as your loading blocks, I read, somebody was saying that your loading blocks can affect your ammunition charge due to static. Maybe, but if you really think about that, it's kind of a long shot. Now, I get it if you're trying to follow every precaution and you're just trying to really go overboard. That's cool, I get it. But like I said, people has used plastic tools for decades, okay? People use plastic loading blocks for decades. People use the plastic lead dippers for decades, plastic funnels, and so on. Your powder comes in a plastic jug. Most of your powder dispensers are made out of plastic. So, most of the stuff is made out of plastic. Now, is metal better? Probably. But is it a necessity? No. Plastic or metal will do the same job. And if you're paying attention to what you're doing and you're careful with what you're doing, then you'll have no problem with static or any kind of issues. Just pay attention to what you're doing. Take good care of your stuff and pay attention, and you'll be fine. You won't have any problem. Okay? The next thing I want to talk about is load data. I made a video the other night, but I quickly realized some things I said that I didn't really clarify, and I didn't want to post the video and then everybody get on to me. So I wanted to make sure that before I talk about this subject, I clarify my point. So can you cross-reference load data? Can you use load data, let's say 44 Magnum. You got a 240 grain XTP bullet, 44 Magnum. And then you have a 44 grain Speer, I think it's deep curl. Let's double check. Hang on. Well, you got a few. You got the 240 grain jacketed hollow point, gold dot hollow point, gold dot soft point, mag jacketed soft point. Okay, so you got a few different 240 grain Speer bullets. Okay, so let's get the Hornady book, and we're looking at. Let's just look at the revolver data. Okay, so. Let me flip back here, because there's one in specific that I'm looking for that I want to talk about. Bear with me one moment. Okay, here we go. So we're going to look at the 200 grain XTP versus the 200 grain Jacketed Hollow Point by Speer. Okay, let me flip this around here. Okay, so you see here, you've got all your powders, right? 200 grain XTP. Okay, so you see all the powders, but HS7 is not listed, right? You don't see HS7 there anywhere. But what if you've got HS7 and you don't have any of these powders? You've got those bullets, but you don't have those powders, but you do have HS7. What do? If you look over here at the Speer book, HS7 is listed for the 200 grain Jacketed Hollow Point. You have 15 grains starting charge, and it goes up to 17 grains max. Now, let's look at the H110. Oh yeah, and it suggests a Magnum primer too. Let's look at the H110, which also suggests a Magnum primer. 26.5 starting grains, 28.5 max. And over here, 25.8 up to 28.7, but it does not suggest a Magnum primer. But you notice the data is very similar. Yeah, excuse me, I got some kind of allergies going, but if you notice the data is very similar. Okay. So, again, you've got that bullet, but you don't have those powders, but you do have HS7. Yes, you can use the HS7. I've done it a million times. I've actually found that just because it is an XTP bullet made by Hornady does not mean that because HS7 isn't listed in the Hornady data table, it doesn't mean you can't use it. You can use it. You got to start low now. You got to follow the book. So if the book says 15 grains for the starting charge, then that's where I would start. I'd start at 15 grain and I'd work my way up until I got what I was looking for. You want to watch for pressure. You want to, and a few things you want to watch for with pressure is, you know, your primer. That's the first telltale sign, your primer. But also recoil. How did it feel when you shot it? And if you know your firearm and you know your ammunition, you're going to know if the recoil is off. Okay? Especially with 44 Magnum. But also you're going to look at things like, is the case hard to eject? Did it do any damage to the case? Or is the case covered in black soot? Or, of course, did you get a squib load? Or, you know, is your accuracy? I mean, there's several things, several factors that you want to look at. But yes, you can cross-reference data. I do it all the time, and so do hundreds of other, thousands of other people. Now, I'm not saying just go wild with powder, okay? But if you have a 240 grain bullet, 200 grain bullet, 180 grain bullet, whatever, as long as the data you're using falls within that same grain bullet weight, you can use it. Now, when it comes to using lead bullets, you could still do the same, but you have to watch for a few more things. You have to watch for barrel leading. And you have to, you know, because some bullets you got to have a gas check and some you don't. So if you're using a very real hot powder and you're using a lead bullet, it could cause some extra leading in your barrel. It could affect your accuracy. I mean, there's a few other things that can affect. So you got to really pay attention to what you're doing. But again, the answer is yes, you can cross-reference the data. I do it all the time. Now, let's just say hypothetically you bought 100 surplus bullets from, say, American Reloading, okay? and the bullets you bought were some odd bullet weight. Like say you're loading 243 and you got, some bullets that were, let's say 83 grain, right? Well, you're not going to find specific 83 grain data. So what do? You use the data for the next heaviest bullet. Say you get those surplus bullets and you don't know what brand they are. They could be Hornady, they could be Sierra, they could be, who knows what. So just because you can't find the data, that does not mean that you're not going to be able to use those bullets. What you need to do is you need to inspect those bullets, try to find a comparable one in your manuals, and use the next heaviest weight. I've done it 1,000 times. It works. And you can still get good accuracy and everything. You also got to keep in mind, a lot of times these people that publish these manuals, they've got certain legal guidelines they have to stay within. They got to stay within SAMI specs. I mean, they got a lot of guidelines they have to go by. They can't print data that's potentially dangerous. They can't tell you something in a book that's going to be potentially dangerous. You go blow yourself up, and then you go, well, the Hornady book told me to do it. So they have certain guidelines they have to stay within as well. Okay? Now, do not take me wrong. I'm not saying just grab a bullet and some dyes and some powder and load away. I'm not saying that. It is best to try to stick with, the right data for the right bullet. You get a Hornady bullet, it is best to stick with the Hornady data. It is. But you can also use other manufacturers' data. I've done it. Okay? And I know a lot of other people's done it. I've had a lot of conversations with other guys that have done the same thing. Okay? And if you're watching this video and you're questioning about it, ask around. Now, you're also going to have those guys that, they don't go off the data tables for any reason, and that's cool. That's what you're supposed to do. And they're going to tell you that everything I'm saying is wrong. And that's fine. But as you work in this hobby for a little bit, and you experiment, and you test, and you experiment, and you test, and you take notes, and you document and study, you will find that there are a lot of, there's a lot of ways you can go. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say wiggle room. I don't want to say gray areas, because that's not really what I'm getting at. But there are a lot of ways you can go with loading. There's a lot. Okay. Now, when it comes to cast bullets, there are a few things you got to watch for, because you don't want to let up your barrel. You don't want to load a load too hot. It's going to melt the lead before it even exits the barrel. I mean, you got to be careful with lead. But still, even with lead, I mean, I cross-reference data all the time. Matter of fact, today I was shooting 44 Magnum with the 240 grain cast bullets that I casted myself. And I used 13 grains of HS7. That data, I had to really look in several places to find it. What gave me the idea was the dyes I have has a card inside of it of someone else's data, and that's what they actually used 14. So I researched, and I was like, well, and I found data to support that, so I used it, and it worked wonderful. Okay. Now another thing. Today, for example, with 223, I loaded a 52 grain hollow point, Bowtail hollow point bullet with 25.5 grains of accurate 4064. If you look through manuals, you're not going to find that data anywhere. I mean, maybe. I can't say I've read every manual. I mean, it might be out there. But the way I found that load was comparing burn rates to other powders that was on that data table. And then I compared that data table to other data tables. I looked at Speer, Hornady, and Sierra. Okay. And then I found powders. IMR 4064 is extremely close to accurate 4064. and it's like 2 away from accurate, I think. But anyway, so I compared the burn rates, and I compared the speeds, and I compared accurate 4064 versus IMR 4064 and other calibers, and kind of looked at the closeness of the data, and I found a good starting charge, and I started out at 23 grains. I knew that starting at 23 grains, I was still on the safe side, because if you look in the Hornady book and you look at 223, and it was in a bolt action rifle, by the way, 52 grain bullet. Let's see. Well, IMR 4064 is not listed here. I think it's listed in the Lee. Hang on. It's either in the Lee or the Lyman where I found it. But anyway, let's see if we can find it here. 223. Okay, 52 grain boat tail hollow point. Yeah, here we go. So IMR 4064 with the Spear 52 grain boat tail hollow point match bullet, which is almost the exact same thing as the Hornady bullet. But anyway, your starting charge is 24 grains of IMR 4064, and your max charge is 26 compressed. Okay. So when I compared the burn rates, and I also compared other calibers that use both of those powders, established data, and that's how I worked up my starting load. And I started at 23, and because the 23 was slightly below what the Spear book said for IMR, started at 23, and I just kept working. I went 23.3, 0.5, 0.7, then 24, same thing, and I got up 25.5, and I was stacking them on top of each other. I had 3 right in the same hole. So, so what I'm getting at is, it's okay to experiment, but make sure that you're experimenting safely. You're not just, you're not trying to use Varget in a 9mm or something. That's not going to work. But when it comes to rifle powders, you look at the burn rates, and if you are cross-referencing data, or you're trying to find data for a bullet that, you're not sure of the manufacturer, you always want to look at burn rates. You want to look at all your data tables, and you want to find the most suitable load for that bullet and go test it, experiment with it. And as you experiment, take notes. I've got 50 notebooks full of notes. I used to use little index cards and put them in those little boxes, but I ended up with so many index cards. So I've been using notebooks for the past few years, and I've got several. And on occasion, I do reference those notebooks. I go back and look, or if I'm working on the load, or, getting out a rifle that I hadn't shot in a while, or get a new rifle and trying to find a load for it, whatever. Sometimes I do look at my prior data. I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that. So to sum this up, okay, plastic tools, they are okay to use. Okay, if you want to go buy metal tools, then by all means, go buy metal tools. That's fine. But plastic tools are okay to use. In addition to that, when it comes to your equipment, your presses, your prep tools, your dies, all that sort of thing, you don't have to have the most expensive, latest and greatest stuff. You just don't. It's cool if you do, but you don't have to. Okay? In addition to that, same thing at the range. I mean, look, I've seen guys with a Savage Axis shoot just as good as the guy that's got the $2,000 Weatherby. Okay? Yeah, it might take a little more work to make that Savage shoot that way, but you can make it shoot that way. You don't have to have the latest and greatest. You don't have to have all the high-end, top-notch stuff. Now, me, I've got high-end stuff, and I've got low-end stuff. I've got, simple stuff, and, I've got the complicated stuff. But, and I use it all for different things. I've got you know what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 8 presses. I use them all for something different, you know, but you don't have to do that. Okay, so to sum it up, keep it simple, study, take notes, experiment, and practice. Okay, practice makes perfect. The more you work at it, the better you'll get at it. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up with that. I'm going to get back on here and start making more videos pretty soon now that things with work are starting to slow down a little bit. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening. Also, Republic Ammunition. You know, they're a great place to order from. I order a lot of stuff from them. I got some primers from them the other day. I placed the order Thursday and I had them Saturday. So if you're looking to order some stuff, you know, primers or powder or whatever, look them up. Republic Ammunition. They're in Lima, Ohio. I've actually called the guy. I talked to him, you know, on his cell phone. He's a really cool guy. So Republic Ammunition, they're great people to deal with. You know, they don't even know I'm giving them a shout out here, but you know, I know a lot of guys are looking for stuff and you got to wonder about scams or whatever. So, you know, definitely check them out. So thanks for watching. Remember, if you're not shooting, you should be reloading. Have a good evening. Guns don't kill people, Clintons do.